Right, so we should be live now whenever we want to start, just because we're a few minutes before to do the interviews. And we have one of our candidates here, and we're just waiting for Emily. So we'll just give her a minute, and then we will. And I did have some communication with her earlier about the 5:45 time, so I know she's running and on her way here. Colin, if you were joining early because you had public comment about our interviews, do you want to go ahead and raise your hand? If you're just here for the meeting, you do not need to raise your hand. All right. Well, thank you for joining early and being here to hear our interviews. All right. So we do have both of our candidates here in the waiting. So I do think Emily will be joining us, but it's up to you, Mayor, if you want to give a few more minutes or.
Let's see. Why don't we just wait one more minute? Oh, there she is. Okay. Hey.
Sorry, my computer decided to shut down, so I'm on my phone. I'll be on my computer soon.
No problem. No problem. Thanks, Emily. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the committee interviews being held just before our regular council meeting this evening. We will be interviewing 2 candidates for 1 vacancy on the Transportation Safety Committee. And we did already check for public comment, and it looks like we don't have any before we do interviews, but I'll just ask one more time, any public comment? Raise your hand if so. Okay, just want to double check. Great. To get started, let's welcome our first applicant, Misael Ramos Carrasco. I will ask an opening question, and if other council members wish to ask a question, then raise your Zoom hand or your real hand, and then I'll call on you. So welcome, Misael. Could you start by sharing what interested you in serving on the Transportation Safety Committee?
Sorry, Mayor, I was just bringing them in, so I may not have heard the whole.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome. Hi. Well, if you could just start by sharing what interested you in serving on the city's Transportation Safety Committee.
Of course, yeah, there's a number of reasons. For starters, my experience in Arcata has been one of personal growth where basically my how would I put it? The degree, I guess, to which I was able to incorporate multimodal transportation in my own lifestyle in terms of obviously cycling and getting around on foot. And so that's part of the reason why, or rather that's one aspect of my interest in transportation. Some of the others being, pursuant to my discipline as a planner, road safety, where rural access and fire safety is concerned, and as an environmentalist too, and someone who is on board with sounding the alarm on climate change. I feel an obligation to do whatever possible to orient folks away from their personal oil burners.
Thank you. And just, I forgot to say at the very beginning of these, we usually keep these interviews pretty brief. So let me just see if there's any other members of the council that have follow-up questions. Councilmember Schaefer, go ahead.
Maybe just one quick follow-up question, and thank you for giving us a thorough explanation of who you are and why you're interested. But so what do you think then would be like one top main thing that you would want to accomplish by being on part of this committee?
Well, I am a big fan of the space that some establishments have been able to dedicate over the past year or so to outdoor dining in lieu of offering as much nearby parking at places such as in the plaza or the pub, for instance. I would personally like to facilitate a greater degree of permanence for those features.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there we go. Unmute button.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I've known him for, I don't know, maybe a year or so now. He's actually my neighbor, and just say he's a pretty good guy.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Sounds like we were listening to a new song.
All right, that was me.
Feedback? No, it's fine. Okay, well, it sounds like we don't have any other questions. So thank you. We'll talk to Wendy Ring next, and then later on in our agenda this evening, we'll be making a decision.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure to meet you. Okay. Great. Well, next we have Wendy Ring. And so again, I'll just start with an opening question. Could you start with just sharing what interests you in serving on the Transportation Safety Committee?
Sorry. All those buttons just became active. I've lived in this area for a long time. I'm biking and walking distance to Arcata, and I do both frequently. And I also am a climate activist. I've been working for the last 7 years at many aspects of that, including in promoting cycling and walking and transit. And there are a lot more things that we could do. It's pretty clear that people don't bicycle unless we make it safe for them to bicycle. And the sharrows that we have, just for an example, don't really feel that safe. I would love to see us get some protected bike lanes. I'd love to see us have I'd like to see us have a plaza that where people can walk around and not worry about people driving from the bars. I think there's many things that we could do, and so I'd love to contribute.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any questions from the council.
Have you had an opportunity to attend a meeting?
I have not.
Okay.
I have been involved in the as a citizen in the HCOG subcommittee that developed the climate action goals and metrics and timeline. That's the only thing governmental locally that I've been involved with.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from the council? Okay. Well, Wendy, like I said in the beginning, we usually keep these interviews pretty brief. So really,
I'll say.
Yeah. So we will be making a decision later on in tonight's agenda. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Misael sounds like a great candidate too. So I think either of us would do.
Or we feel very fortunate to have tough choices like the two of you.
yeah, I would be happy either way. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So it is only 5:54. If we want to just take a short break until 6 o'clock.
Sure.
All right. We will resume at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thanks.
All right, whenever you are ready to start, we are on.
Okay, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our June 2nd regular meeting of the Arcata City Council. The City Council meeting is being held as teleconference in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We want to encourage everyone to please keep up the efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19 in Arcata. We know that by wearing masks and practicing social distancing, we can reduce this spike and keep our businesses open. So please support our businesses by masking up in Arcata. If you wish to make public comment during the meeting, either at the 2 open public comment periods or for an individual agenda item, there are 2 ways to do so. So the first is if you're logged on to the Zoom webinar, click on raise your hand on the right-hand side of the screen. When it is time for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, the clerk will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to comment. The second way is accessing the meeting by phone. Call the number at the bottom of the screen, enter the meeting ID also at the bottom of the screen, and press *9 on your phone. This will raise your hand. When it is time for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, the clerk will unmute your phone. You will hear a prompt that will indicate that your phone is unmuted and you will have 2 minutes to comment. So with that, next on our agenda, we have the flag salute. If you would like to join, please feel free to do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Pereira,
Here.
Vice Mayor Watson,
Here.
Councilmember Adkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Goldstein,
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Here.
all present.
Great, thank you. Next, under ceremonial matters, we have a proclamation in recognition of Arcata and Six Rivers High School Safe and Sober Graduation Day, Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Whereas safe graduation parties are a nationwide project sponsored by health organizations, businesses, law enforcement agencies, and many other groups. And whereas this year's Arcata High School and Six Rivers Charter High School senior classes, their parents, and the community are overwhelmingly in support of attending and providing a safe graduation party. And whereas 5,000 teenagers die and 400,000 are seriously injured in auto accidents each year. Of the 15 to 20-year-old drivers who die in car crashes, 23% have blood alcohol levels of 0.08% or higher, enough to be charged with driving under the influence if they were adults. And whereas residents throughout the county have agreed to drive with their lights on during graduation week, and the Arcata community has volunteered to keep porch lights on throughout graduation night on Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby designates Thursday, June 10th, 2021 as Arcata High School and Six Rivers Charter High School Safe and Sober Graduation Day in the City of Arcata, and congratulates the graduating class of 2021. So we will make sure that gets to them, and congratulations on making it through a wild senior year, to say the least. You did it. Okay, next we have early oral communications. This 15-minute time period is provided for people to address the council on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the council may respond to statements. Any request that requires council action will be set by the council for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers addressing the council at this time are limited to 2 minutes, and we can take up to 7 speakers. So please raise your hand if you are on Zoom, or press *9 if you are calling in by phone and wish to make a comment. Do we have any public comment at this time?
We are seeing no public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. So I'll go ahead and read through the consent calendar. Item A, approve the minutes of the special City Council meeting of May 19th, 2021. B, approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting of May 19th, 2021. C, biweekly report on general warrants. D, adopt resolution number 201-57, approving the fiscal year 2021-22 annual report on stormwater drainage maintenance fee for all non-tax exempt parcels and directing that said fee be collected through the property tax rolls for fiscal year 2021-22. E, adopt resolution number 201-56, approving the fiscal year 2021-22 annual report on measure A, special tax for all non-tax exempt parcels and directing that said fee be collected through the property tax rolls for fiscal year 2021-22. F, award bid for the 2021 timber sale of redwood logs to R&L Lumber, 1,175 MBF, and Douglas fir logs, $550 MBF, grand fir logs, 420 MBF, and Sitka spruce logs, $312 MBF to South Coast Lumber Company, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. G, approve the purchase of approximately 19,000 linear feet of wiring material, award the purchase contract to the lowest bidder, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. H, approve an amendment to the professional services agreement with Carollo Engineers, Inc. for Phase 1 final design of the Arcata wastewater treatment facility upgrade, increase the compensation amount by $176,448, 5.5%, for a new total not to exceed $3,371,151, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. I, approve a dial-a-ride funding agreement for the city of Arcata for fiscal year 2021-22 in the amount of $79,281 and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. And last but not least, J, adopt resolution number 201-58, approving revised total annual appropriations subject to limitation for fiscal years 2019-20 and 2020-21. Is there any council member that would like to remove an item for separate discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there any member of the public or staff that would like an item to be removed from the consent calendar?
No members of the public.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, I'll entertain a motion from the council.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will call the vote by roll call. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we are on to old business. Item A, declare a continuation of the local emergency related to the coronavirus pandemic. And may we have a staff report from City Manager Deemer, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. As we're getting fairly routine at doing, we do need to approve at least once every 40 days the local emergency to make sure that we can continue to respond and or receive reimbursement for certain expenses associated with our response to the coronavirus pandemic. So typically we've been routinely doing these on consent unless there is some change in terms of something that we would be enacting. So this has come before you in old business to revisit the extension of allowing us to delay enforcement on a certain provision of what we refer to as Ordinance number 1527, which was the city's ordinance around disposable foodware. And that ordinance would require delis, retailers, restaurants that are providing to-go food containers to try to encourage people to bring in reusable containers. So while they're still required to use compostable containers based on that ordinance, during the pandemic, we have been waiving the provision that would require delis, restaurants, and retailers to charge a customer 25 cents for that compostable container and or incentivize customers by giving them a 25-cent discount if they brought their own container. During the pandemic, local food restrictions associated with serving through the pandemic would actually prohibit them from taking reusable containers and filling them with food behind the counter and then transporting back over the counter. So while we do see that regulations are starting to lift, some of the bulk food bins are reopening at some of the local stores. Our outreach to restaurants and delis locally have said that they still have not raised a provision to allow reusable containers. So the recommendation, when this came before the council initially, you extended the delay of the enforcement of that provision by 6 months. So we're coming back to revisit and requesting that we do another 6-month delay. And or if the pandemic restrictions are really waived or raised earlier, that we would eliminate and start enforcement at that time. But at this point, we do anticipate likely about the 6-month mark is when they could start to take in reusable containers again that a customer would bring to the deli counter.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask for questions from the council, starting with Vice Mayor Watson.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldstein,
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Schaefer.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, and I don't have any as well. Do we have any members of the public that'd like to comment on this item?
There are no members of the public for this item.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to continue the local emergency related to the coronavirus pandemic and to extend the I don't know what we call them, the new rules for another 6 months or until the pandemic ends, whichever comes sooner, whichever comes first.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote by roll call. Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you. And next we have item B, introduce ordinance number 1546, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, amending zoning regulations pertaining to formula restaurants. And may we have a staff report from Community Development Director Loya.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Before you tonight is the introduction of Ordinance 1546, which does amend the city's formula restaurant ordinance. And we're recommending that you open a public hearing, receive any public comment, introduce Ordinance 1546, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata amending zoning regulations pertaining to formula restaurants, waive reading of the text, and consent to read by title only, and then continue the item to June 16th for adoption. Just a little bit of background for the council and the community. On April 21st, council received a draft zoning interpretation and confirmed the zoning interpretation that currently there's a disconnect between our definitions and the restaurants that we wish to regulate as formula restaurants, and initiated a zoning amendment. I brought the draft ordinance to the Planning Commission under Planning Commission Resolution PC 2102, which they adopted on the 25th of May, and brought the item to the Economic Development Committee last night. Both the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Committee recommended adopting this ordinance. The Economic Development Committee did have some discussions, as did the Planning Commission, about the limitations in Valley West, recognizing the locational advantage of having formula restaurants near where you have hotels, but also recognizing the impact that that would have on the residents in the area, limiting their food choices. And so those discussions did come up. Additionally, at the Economic Development Committee meeting, the committee discussed some potential additional limitations in the Northtown area, specifically on size, number, and location. So if the City Council wants to take that up, we can dig in that into more detail. But I did want to just walk you through the ordinance using a PowerPoint to sort of simplify all the underlined strikeout that's included. Can you confirm for me that you can see the full screen and you don't see the slide advance notes? Okay, perfect. Okay, so So one of the key issues was around the definition of a formula restaurant. Surprisingly, almost no one has a succinct definition of a restaurant, which struck me as very odd because none of us gets up to go out to eat for dinner and then ends up at any other place than a restaurant. So clearly we know what they are. But to accomplish the goals of the council, I worked on the following key elements in the new definition, effectively just striking out the old definition and adopting a new definition. I made reference for permanent food facility and ready-to-eat food to the California Food Code, so those are now defined. As it turned out, when I was talking to the local Department of Public Health, their food inspectors, he said that, under California Food Code, Papa Murphy's pizza actually is ready to eat. Everything on the pizza is edible in the form that they give it to you. So if you wanted to eat one of those raw, you can, which was also something interesting I learned while doing this work. But to further define it, really what it boiled down to capture the kinds of restaurants that we were looking to capture, we had to add to the definition that the food was menu ordered, and again, reinforcing that it's counter table or drive-through service or additional types of service. And really those two last parts of the definition break apart the categories that would otherwise include many other types of facilities, like liquor stores or anywhere that sells prepared food. And so these two were the ones that are really novel to the definition. So apart from just cleaning up language, making reference to California Food Code and adding these get us down to sort of a smaller subset of things like grocery delis and true traditional restaurants. There wasn't a way that I could figure out to further parse out a deli from a restaurant. I think that, again, we know it when we see it, but if we want to regulate these formula restaurants, we have to have a tight definition. And so really this only matters when it comes to the difference between, accessory uses. We had a lot of discussion about, how Safeway Deli, it's signature brand, it's branded the same as Safeway. There are lots of Safeways, and so it would qualify as a pattern retail. And so I added a subsection B to the 942.164 code section that essentially says if the primary use is not a restaurant and the accessory is not a franchise, then it's not a formula restaurant, even if it meets all the other criteria for becoming a formula restaurant. And so this portion exempts out things like Safeway Signature Deli. It's clearly got a pattern, you order from a counter. For all other reasons under food code and under our definition, it's considered a restaurant. So that subsection B would exclude Safeway's Signature Deli. But if the accessory is a franchise or otherwise the entire primary is owned by, a restaurant, it qualifies as a restaurant, then it is a formula restaurant. So if either of those criteria are true, then it is a formula restaurant. And this is the case with Chevron's Chester's Chicken. So the primary use is not a restaurant, but the accessory use is a franchise. And so it's pattern retail, it's formula restaurant, and it qualifies as such under this new regulation. We did have some folks that wanted to know in a little more detail where where this would be in place. We had some discussion about, which zones it would be excluded from and where it would be, allowed. So I just wanted to share with you real quick our zoning map and run through the areas where formula restaurants are allowed currently under code with this new change where they would be allowed currently. So it's in the commercial visitor serving and the CVS designation or the commercial general, this orange designation or the yellowish designation, goldenrod or whatever color that is. Those zoning districts are the only ones that would allow for formula restaurants as a principally permitted activity. So here in the Valley West and over on the James Road, they'd be allowed. Zooming out There's also a little bit of commercial general at the corner of Spear and Alliance. Some of our other neighborhood market areas, like the Murphy's Market, Westwood Market here, those are commercial mixed. So those don't allow formula restaurants. So anything, it's not just everywhere where there's commercial. Going south a little bit more, we get into the Northtown area. The entire Northtown business district up to the central commercial is allowable. Central commercial is, it is not allowed, both by the zoning table and by the explicit call out. So all of this red, it's not allowed. Finally, ending our tour, going south, there's the Safeway Shopping Center, a little bit of commercial general on Samoa. And that is it. So those orange designations. Now there is one caveat to that, and that's in the, I'm gonna turn off the standard zoning here for a sec. In the Creamery District, and I apologize, some of the lines are hidden behind roads, but in the Creamery District, formed by the border of K Street here, and then this purple line, formula restaurants are actually allowed with a use permit. And so if a formula restaurant wanted to locate there, there would have to be a free formula restaurant, but they would also have to go through a use permit process. And so that's another zone where theoretically under the new regulation, a formula restaurant could locate. It's important to note though, that despite the fact that there are all these other zoning districts where they could locate, right now the cap set at 9 is full. And so the formula restaurants that are existing in the Valley West and in the Safeway Shopping Center, Uniontown Shopping Center, those are basically locations for the near term and foreseeable future. I did just want to touch briefly on the the couple of discussions that Planning Commission had with respect to the total number that's required to qualify as a formula restaurant, and also the total number of formula restaurants on the ground. So right now the ordinance reads that if a restaurant has more than 11 locations, so you have 12 or more locations, then you qualify as a formula restaurant. The rumor is that ties back to the number of business districts that we had. So a restaurant could theoretically, a local restaurant could locate in every single business district and not be considered a formula restaurant. The reality of the situation is that most formula restaurants have thousands of locations, and even Westside Pizza has tens. I believe they have maybe more than 100. And so 12 is artificially low. There was some concern among the Planning Commission in their first review that some of our restaurants that do otherwise qualify as pattern, Ramones, Jitterbean, et cetera, are doing quite well and have several locations and are getting close to that 12 threshold, but they're not quite there yet. And so they wanted to have a conversation around raising the limit. Ultimately, the Planning Commission didn't recommend raising that cap, figuring that they could come back to it later if need be. I think that there may be some sort of protectionist claims that could be made against the city if we all of a sudden decide to raise the cap when Ramones wants one more, and so that's something to consider. I certainly don't think a cap on the number of distinct locations that any one restaurant has set at something like 50 would hurt us now if you wanted to change that. But that's not how it currently reads. And then in regards to the total number of restaurants on the ground, as we mentioned in the staff report, shortly after we had our April 21 hearing, where we discussed this first, I found out that we actually have another formula restaurant that's in the works. In fact, there's a Domino's that's received a building permit to locate in the Northtown where the old Subway was. And so if all of the permits are issued, that are currently in process, we would have 10 and not 9. And so I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention. I don't necessarily recommend that you change the cap to 10. You can have 10 for a time, and then that could whittle down to 9 in the future. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And certainly there may be some public members. There have been a couple of folks that have tracked this along the way, and they may want to speak to that.
I was going to do by roll call, but is that okay? Councilmember Atkins Salazar? Okay. Okay. We'll start with Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. I guess I have a question. If the cap is currently set at 9, then is it possible, like you said, we could have 10 and then it could whittle back down to 9. So they are able to obtain a permit even if they're a 10th restaurant?
Yeah, there's actually no permit associated with a formula restaurant. There's just a limitation on the total number. And so it puts us in kind of this odd situation where we have to basically deny a building permit in order to regulate it, which is unfortunate for the person who's wanting to open a formula restaurant, because most people don't come and ask the city, hey, do you mind if I locate? They just go out and get a lease with someone, they drop the plans, and then they come in and submit building plans. By that time, they've spent thousands of dollars, and then we tell them, sorry, you can't open, we have this ordinance. But that's neither here nor there, that's just the way that it is. But right now we have the 3 restaurants that, 3 locations that are currently trying to move through the system. 2 of those have moved forward pretty aggressively based on the conversations we had in early April. And so we're in sort of this odd position. And certainly if the council wants to say, well, no, we're only going to let 9 establish, and it's the first 9. And if that 10th one, isn't opened in time, then they, that's their tough luck. I'd certainly want to consult with our city attorney on what that would look like and what the timing, get into details on what the timing would look like, because our ordinance won't be in effect until 30 days after after it's adopted. And so certainly if they come in and they're issued a building permit, they're operational within that time frame, then they actually comport with our current regulation. And if they, slip over that time frame a little bit, they get a little past that outside deadline, but they've been diligently working towards getting their building permits. That will be a hard conversation to have.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think my only other question is, again, kind of about the cap. I couldn't remember, based on our last conversation and kind of where we got to today, was it going to be 9 for all of the city of Arcata, or was it going to be like a certain number in Valley West, a certain number in Northtown, and a certain number in the Uniontown Shopping Center?
That's a good question. So it's currently designed so that there's no more than 6 in the Valley West area, and then a total of 9 throughout the city. So if there were 6 in the Valley West, there could be 3 elsewhere in the city.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are my questions for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Thank you so much, David. That was all very clear and helpful. And to everybody else, I hope my connection's okay. I had a quick change of room, so I hope you're hearing me. But right now, I actually don't think I have any questions. Emily asked the question I was thinking of about what the provisions for the number in Valley West would be set at. So I don't think I have anything else right now. So thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
My question is just, I know that there is a business that's been working to locate over in Valley West, and are they being counted in the 10 restaurants?
Yeah, so the total of 10 includes all of the currently known restaurants that are attempting to open and the ones that are existing now. So the business that wants to open in Valley West is included in that count of 10.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Watson.
So if we have a restaurant that has 11 locations and then they decide to open 10 more, are they just grandfathered in? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So we would recognize that businesses existing non-conforming. And in fact, my recollection, I don't have hard data to support this, but my recollection is that's exactly what happened with West Side Pizza. When they first opened, I think they had fewer than 12 locations when they first opened in the Safeway Shopping Center, but they've been aggressively expanding in the West Coast, and now they have I think more than 50 and maybe up to 100. And so if West Side Pizza had opened when it wasn't technically a formula restaurant and then later became a formula restaurant, we would then have an additional formula restaurant location, and we would have to whittle back down. So in the example, more present example of Ramones, I believe has 9 locations right now. I'm sorry, I think they have 6. Let's say that they get 6 more and they hit that magic number of 12 elsewhere in the community. Well, the Ramones that is in Wildberries, and it's totally fine. But if they wanted to open another Ramones somewhere else in town, we would have to tell them, no, I'm sorry, you can't open another Ramones. You're now a formula restaurant, and we already have 9.
Thank you.
Which was part of the reason to maybe have a discussion about bumping that number to 50 or even 100. If you wanted to go as high as 100, I'd have to double check on the West Side Pizza.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions right now. So let's see if there's are there any members of the public that'd like to comment on this item?
As a reminder, if you're logged into Zoom, click on raise your hand on the right side of your screen to comment on this item. And if you have called in via phone, press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. When it is your turn to speak, the clerk will unmute you and invite you to speak. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Is there any attendees that wish to comment on this agenda item? No public comment on this item, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I'll just check for any comments or thoughts, starting with Councilmember Goldstein.
I don't think I have any additional questions or comments right now. I would say that I'd like to keep the cap, or sorry, not the cap, the 12, or not raise it maybe to 50 if we are going to talk about raising it. That feels like a pretty big leap to me. I'd like to hold back a little bit with that number, if that is a discussion we're going to enter into. And then, yeah, other than that, the cap of 9 makes sense to me. I think that we often hear that we're really proud of our local restaurants. And so I think continuing to make sure that they have room to grow and we can highlight those restaurants is important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, Councilmember Watson's question kind of raised another one in my mind. And I guess if we are kind of entering into this discussion about that number of 12, but would there be a way, or is it getting a little too into the weeds, to add perhaps like a provision about if this is a local, Humboldt County founded business, that it could be exempt then from that, increasing over 12, for example, I think of things, like Ramones, Jitter Bean. If they, I would be proud of Jitter Bean if they became a, national corporation, and wouldn't want to, hinder them from being in the community that they started in. But, it would go directly against that idea of, it has now become a formula restaurant. So, is there a way to have a provision like that, or does that get too, it's hard to deal with, I guess.
I'd want to, invite our city attorney to weigh in on that, but I think that, that kind of blatantly protectionist policy is probably not likely to stand legal challenge.
I think that's right. And that is why the ordinance is crafted the way it is, as it was originally drafted with the help of the Economic Development Committee's predecessor committee, and they wrestled with that legal issue and came up with a way to, I think, sort of thread the needle through protectionist ordinances and supporting local businesses.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So thanks.
Okay, let's see. Any comments from Councilmember Atkins Salazar?
I do think that we should entertain that discussion this evening, just so that if, you know, one of our local businesses does grow and push that, then we don't run into, you know, legal issues trying to fit them in or also having to deny them. So I think if, you know, that we should probably have that discussion tonight as to what the number should be. And then I just wanted to voice my opinion, because I'm not sure where everybody else stands, but even though we've got an extra 10th restaurant possibly coming in, I feel like it's important, excuse me, that we move forward and let them come in, because they've already been in the process and we're now changing the rules while they're in the middle of the process. And I just think that that would be not the best business practice if we just, you know, change the rules midstream and they're already invested in it. So I just wanted to voice that as well.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Watson.
You know, I think I'd be fine with just going with the Planning Commission's recommendation of leaving the number at 11 to what qualifies as a formula restaurant. It doesn't sound like we're going to have any local restaurants anytime soon pushing up on that number. I think we could take it as a case-by-case basis if we run into that, and make a decision then if we want to add them. I mean, it's, you know, it'd already be an existing location. It's not like we're bringing like a whole new one into the city. So if we, you know, expanded, I don't know. Yeah, I think that would be okay. And yeah, and I kind of agree with Councilmember Atkins Salazar. And I think the businesses that already have their plans in progress and are working with the city to open up. And I think we can say what the business is in Valley West, right? No, we can't.
I don't know if that's public information.
Okay.
I don't know that they've submitted a building permit.
All right. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, yeah, let me just share a few thoughts I have. I think one, actually, I think part of what's made this discussion difficult for me is that I think even knowing who it is, I feel like it's like, to me, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what the business is in terms of this discussion. So I actually appreciate that that's not being brought into the discussion, because I think at a certain point, from a policymaking perspective, it's not relevant to our decision that we're making tonight. You know, in terms of increasing the number of locations that would then, you know, trigger what's a formula restaurant or not, I'm on the fence about that. You know, I think 12 is, you know, it's a conservative number, obviously, but I feel like I would need more information about what are businesses that are in that range of 12 to 50, like how, like, you know, and it really, I mean, I guess at that point you're getting close to 50. I mean, that's a formula restaurant. Like that's, you know, like, so for me, I feel like where is that line? I don't know. And then in terms of increasing the cap, I guess I have a different perspective. You know, I appreciate, you know, Councilmember Atkins Salazar, your point, and Vice Mayor Watson, your point. And I guess there's also just a part of me that's like, I think of all the projects that have come before us as a council, where people have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into, you know, a business, a housing project, whatever it may be, and it didn't work out. And for a variety of reasons, you know, the community didn't want it, or the council voted a different way, whatever it is. And so, I mean, there is a part of me that feels for any business that, you know, wants to come in and it doesn't pan out. But I don't think that's a unique thing. I think there are various barriers that, you know, interfere with something coming to fruition. And I think given that we have had a policy like this on the books for quite some time, you know, I don't think it's a total shocker that we're, looking at this policy and making sure that we're clarifying the language. So I don't know how others feel about that, but that's kind of where I'm landing on it. And let's see. And yeah, I do support keeping the caps in terms of the zones. I think maintaining some protections, and I think it was helpful. Thank you, David, for doing that overview of like where are the commercial zones where it is possible. And I think for me that just reinforced the importance of having those caps, because we could definitely see disproportionate presence of formula restaurants in one commercial area versus another, one neighborhood versus another, given their current zoning. So those are just kind of where I'm landing on this. So I'll entertain a motion from the council. Don't all jump in.
I just have a question, because we've talked about so many things. So if we, if we make a recommendation to introduce Ordinance 1546, does that means that we keep it at 12? That also means that the 10th person could possibly come in, or no?
If the I would like separate direction on that. If the 10th person is in process when the ordinance goes into effect, I'm not exactly sure where the threshold is for having, cross that line that we would then say, well, you now are existing non-conforming because we have this new regulation. Certainly, if their doors were open or if they had received a certificate of occupancy, then they would be existing non-conforming at the time the regulation goes into place. We're in a little bit more of a, we have to dive into the discussion a little bit more detail, I think, if we want to, cut off at 9, and there may be some additional discussion about when to have the effective date of the ordinance if we want to allow the 10th one in. And so there's a little bit of nuance in there that I think, maybe a straw poll on allowing the 10th or not is necessary.
And just a reminder, you don't have to raise the cap to 10. It would just be the allowance of this 10th one to come in during the rulemaking process. The minute that any of the formula restaurants then closed in Arcata, you would be back down to the 9 cap. There would not be an open slot at that point. The way that it's written tonight, you would keep the cap at 10, or at 9, sorry. That's the worst thing to say. You would keep the cap at 9 for a period of time. You would have a 10.
Just to clarify, it's 11, right? What a formula restaurant is?
There's two numbers, and it's unfortunate because it's a little confusing. In order to be qualified as a formula restaurant, you have to have 12 locations or more. We have a limitation of the total number of 9 formula restaurants of any type within the city. So there's two numbers to keep track of.
I'm just looking at the staff report on page 267, and it says the number 11 in the second paragraph.
Yeah, so this is talking about the total number of locations of a given pattern restaurant.
Right. So you just said it's 12?
You can have, the way that the ordinance is written, you can have 11 and still not be a formula restaurant. And then if you go to 12, then you are a formula restaurant.
I'm wondering actually if City Attorney Diamond could maybe give some guidance to us about, David, where you're seeking some direction on, this 10th location based on where they're at in the process. I think it would just be helpful to have your input in that discussion.
Yes, I think that David is right. It's a little gray area. I think the practice within the city is to honor an application process from when the application is first deemed complete and received as a complete application. And so I think he's trying to be consistent with that practice, meaning that if these applications now in the interim are deemed complete, then they would be allowed to come slide in under the old existing rules. And I think he's right that it's gray area. There's some very clear statutes that apply to when developers' rights vest in certain types of permits, but we don't have those applicable here. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that David is using ongoing practices for what the city normally does. And I'm sorry, David, to be trying to construe what you're
saying. That's exactly right. But I certainly think that I don't know for a fact that all of the businesses have applications in for building permits for their tenant improvements. If this ordinance were adopted today, and the council wanted us to continue that sort of policy of counting complete applications as being in the hopper basically, and allowed to open, would give these businesses basically a 45-day clock to get their applications in. If the council wanted to go beyond that and say, well, we want to honor these 10 regardless of when this thing goes into effect, we'd have to probably get a little more nuanced. And so I think hearing what the council is interested in doing, if the majority of the council is interested in allowing these 10 businesses, regardless of what our new ordinance says, we might work on crafting some language. If the council feels like, well, when the ordinance is in effect, we're sticking to 9, that'll basically set the timer for these businesses to make sure that they've got complete applications into us by the next 45 days. And if the council feels like, well, no, we really want to be very strict and set a policy that we're only accepting 9 one way or the other, unless these businesses have their doors open for business, they've received a certificate of compliance, or I'm sorry, notice of completion for their building permit. That would be on sort of the other extreme. So kind of figuring out where the council wants to land, with this policy discussion, I think helps us identify the best course for adoption of the ordinance.
And if I could also add, from the legal side of this, if the concern is that there's going to be a flood of these kinds of new formula restaurants jumping in before the addition of the change, before it becomes effective, the council's option is to adopt an interim zoning ordinance, which then goes into effect. You have to go through a noticing process, a 15-day noticing process, but that would go into effect and act like a moratorium immediately, and it would prevent any changes, any new formula restaurants from coming into existence and then getting grandfathered. So that's one of the mechanisms that's used to offset this kind of rush to sneak in before the rules change. But I think that given that there's a lead-in time to get to an interim ordinance, and I think that staff decided it wasn't worth it in this situation because I think David was so close to having the complete ordinance ready for the council's consideration.
Councilmember.
I guess I hadn't thought about that aspect of a rush, possibly people trying to get in while there was a loophole, but I am still, would like to, is there a way that we can, if the council decides to include the people that have already been in contact with the city? Because that's my concern. I know that I believe the people that are wanting in right now have been in contact, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, with our city, and have been talking and moving in a forward motion because it seemed like it was allowable. I feel like we should honor that, but not necessarily people just trying to jump in because we're changing it.
2 of the applicants were definitely in process with the city, and those were the 2 that came, that we talked about at the meeting in April. And based on the action that the council took that night, the zoning administrator's decision went into place and basically supported the movement of those 2 businesses. Subsequent to that meeting, we heard from the 3rd business. So this is a business owner, a property owner who had a formula restaurant on that site where the Subway sandwich was, and was in the process in his mind of just transitioning that to Domino's, figuring that he still had the slot for the formula restaurant there. And so, those are the three that are in question here.
And Domino's, I know for a fact, has a building permit in. So even though we didn't know about them when we were having the discussion on the 21st of April, they theoretically could be the first ones to have their doors open.
So my opinion is that we crafted it in a way so that the people, these three businesses that have already been in contact, are able to continue through the process. And then, but that we don't leave room for others to jump in while we're in transition, if that's possible.
I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance number 1546, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, amending zoning regulations pertaining to formula restaurants, waive reading of the text, and consent to read by title only.
I second.
And can you please add to that to continue the meeting, to continue the item to June 16th for adoption? I'm sorry, that wasn't in the written.
That's right. And to continue the item until June 16th for adoption.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And so just to clarify, so this is for this, introducing this ordinance, and then we still would need to discuss then the piece, the gray area piece that we've been talking about. So I just want to, just for the public's clarity and the council's clarity, that we're having two separate.
What's the gray area piece?
About the in-process applications, because I think our ordinance doesn't speak to.
I think it does. The way I read it, I think it covers that. On packet page 268, the last paragraph. This is the last paragraph. Yeah, it says formula restaurants, the three, which is all we've been talking about, open would be 8 total. On the effective date, Papa Murphy's and Chester's Chickens will then be added to the total, resulting in 10.
I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding what staff is requesting of us, but it sounds like, given that there's new applicants.
I think the distinction is that if any of those applicants don't have a building permit in process at the time this becomes effective, and then falling back on our policy, our typical policy, which is, if you have an application in process, you have a complete application, and then the policy changes, we'll, honor that application. So if the ordinance is adopted right now, the way that it stands, that's how we would process this. So the three businesses effectively have 45 days to get us a complete application. Once it becomes effective, if they come in on the 46th day with an application, we'd say, I'm sorry, this ordinance is in effect and we only have 9 spots and there are none available for you. If the council wants to give additional direction about, honoring that regardless of, the implementation of this ordinance, then, we'd need to get a little bit more nuance than what's in the current ordinance. But if everyone's comfortable saying, look, you've got 45 days, you're on notice now, we're adopting this new regulation, get your building permits in. We know that there are these 3 that have been working on it to, in some way, shape, or form. I doubt that anybody else is going to be able to get an application in that 45-day period. So I don't think that's an issue. So I guess that's the only gray area. I would recommend that we somehow, either honor or notify these people that it's not going to be honored after, the ordinance becomes effective, and just give them a real clear signal that that's how we're going to implement it.
And in the unlikely event that another application does try to get in, that's when we would jump into action and bring you either via a regular council meeting or an emergency meeting, a special meeting, to talk about if you want to put a moratorium in, to, you have a backstop and a provision to stop that. So we'll keep that in mind based on the discussion tonight.
Yeah, I guess I just want to express a concern, just thinking about our current, our cap has been for well over a decade, 9, and basically without any additional protective measure, this be a third of an increase in in a very short amount of time. And that just doesn't sit well with me. I mean, I get it that there's folks that have put their applications in, and I feel like it's it's just kind of a confluence of multiple people expressing an interest at the same time. And I feel like that's going to make a big impact just because that happened right now.
Well, 2 of them are already existing businesses, like the Chester Chicken and the Subway. They're just moving. So they're not really new. And there's just 2 new ones, which would be Domino's and then the one in Valley West.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is there's the Domino's and then there's another one that's, that we're not talking about. That's not public knowledge, but I guess I just have a concern about the implications of that.
Can we vote?
Absolutely. I just have a right to speak my piece on it. Are there any other thoughts or comments?
I have a question. So what constitutes, and to keep it going, but what constitutes a completed application? And, have these 3 businesses reached that? And, does it seem like they would? Or will we be in a situation where, yeah, we probably will be at 9 or even at 8 and allowing, maybe one to come after this ordinance goes through?
Nature, do you want to take what constitutes a complete building permit application?
Sorry.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, no worries.
No, it's okay. And I can repeat, Nitra, if you want me to. I mean, just basically, it says we need to have a completed application for it to be counted. So, I mean, what constitutes that? And would these businesses even theoretically, especially the one that is, going to go into Valley West and has a little bit more to do, would that theoretically even happen in this time period?
To constitute an application or complete, we need to have an application filled out by an applicant, which has all the information filled out in the forms. And we have a checklist that what they need to submit with the application. For example, in this case, I'm not sure who the person or the business is, but they have to submit 3 sets of plans. And once we review that and we take the fee, then we will say it's complete. If it's not complete, we may not take the fee from them because it's not complete application. So the moment we take the fees in, I would say it's a complete application.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. For me, that clears up a little bit and makes me, feel almost more comfortable with this kind of, I guess, cutthroat approach of, saying, okay, you got 45 days, especially for a business that is planning on building something and has a little bit more, a distance to go. It might seem to them, okay, we can't get this done in 45 days. This might not be the place. We already knew that this community had an ordinance similar to this. Maybe this isn't the community that we want to put this in, so that's kind of where I'm standing on that as well.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I feel very on the fence about this because I really see, compassion for people that have started the process. But I do agree with Mayor Pereira that I have some reservations and concerns that we are, slow one, then maybe, it's another one. And that's just not what we really want in Arcata, I think. And so I'm feeling really torn. And so, yeah, I just wanted to voice that I am feeling really torn right now. But that, I don't know. I don't want this to get out of hand by accident, just because we're trying to be compassionate to one business, I guess.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I will call the vote by roll. Councilmember Goldstein.
That's just cruel to make me vote.
I know. I keep it consistent with the items.
I know. I'll vote aye.
I got to keep it consistent. Okay. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well. And I really appreciate us taking the time to talk this through. I think we didn't have any members of the public to speak on this item, but I do know that we've received communications from folks that express that this policy that we've had in Arcata is really a landmark policy and sets Arcata apart. And so I think the deliberations that we're having here are incredibly important. So I appreciate everyone taking the time and being patient in that conversation, because it is an important part of our community. So the motion passes, and thank you, and we'll see where it lands. Okay. Next, we have new business. Appoint one new member to the Transportation Safety Committee for a term expiring March 31st, 2024. Let's see, do we have a recommendation to appoint a member to the Transportation Safety Committee, or any questions from the council? Is there any discussion that we'd like to have, or a motion? Councilmember Schaefer. Go ahead.
I move that we appoint Misael Ramos to the Transportation Safety Committee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. First off, any members of the public that would like to comment on this item before we take a vote?
Checking for public comment, and there is no public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. So I will call the vote by roll call. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Congratulations, Misael. Really, really grateful to both you and Dr. Ring for stepping up and offering to serve, and definitely hope you'll stay connected, Dr. Ring, and being involved in our work. So motion passes. Next, we have an update on Homelessness Services Working Group and current projects. May I have a staff report from City Manager Deemer?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. I will try to be brief, but tonight's agenda item really comes at the request of the Council after I know several of you have had conversations with community members expressing concerns regarding sort of the increase that we're seeing, in part because of the COVID pandemic, of unsheltered individuals around the business districts in the city. Tonight's update is intended to review some of the community work to date, the work of the Homelessness Services Working Group partnership that the city holds monthly meetings with, and to generate discussions and ideas about additional services or solutions that group and our community and our partners could work on together. So I'm just going to go through sort of a quick review of sort of the recent efforts of the Homeless Services Working Group. This group has been established for a couple of years now, and the group has had some good success in projects such as establishing mobile medical services, both in the downtown area and the Valley West neighborhood, securing grants to hire the mobile intervention services team members that we have, the mental health clinicians that are now working side by side in the police department, rehabilitation and construction of several units. So support for the Arcata Gardens, affordable housing, rehabilitation, and the 44 units that will be coming online this year, the Sorrel Place being built in the downtown region. Securing tenant-based rental assistance. This is a program that we offered for a couple of years. We lost funding for it. We've now secured funding, and that will be starting back this fall. There'll be more on that in upcoming agendas of the council. Establishing mobile showers and providing food and warming provisions during the PG&E power shutdowns. And then during the pandemic, we focused on two primary sheltering options. The first has been 25 hotel rooms that were secured and then supported with meals and services. Those hotels have been operational for over a year now, and that program is slated to end June 30th at the end of this month. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later in some potential short-term goals. And then we did have a period of time where we were able to receive state funding to provide alternative shelter through 2 parking lot shelter locations. And those shelter sites operated in total for about 130 days. We had 95 different individual participants that stayed for a total of what we call bed nights, of 3,576 bed nights. So the average length of stay per participant in that program was about 38 days. 14 people were transferred into sort of brick and mortar shelters. 6 of them were permanently housed. All of the individuals that came to those sites were known to be homeless here in the Arcata area, and 41 of them really were known to be chronically homeless here in Arcata. And in that period, again, of just about 4.5 months, served over 10,000 meals through those 2 sites. So the program at that alternative shelter provided, a safe place. We had tents and cots that were provided through the county, and then funding that also came through the county that supported meals, water, showers, laundry vouchers, bathrooms and hand washing stations on site, cell phone charging, and then wraparound case management as we could start to build through that period of time while we had funding. The group also has several upcoming projects that are in the works. Several of these the council has already talked about, so I won't go into great detail. But one of the largest is the community development block grants, what we call CV2 and 3, rounds 2 and 3 for COVID funding. And that grant will provide money to do staffing to do intake at the One Stop, which is down near the transit annex. And this helps homeless individuals locate services, including housing in the region, outreach to encampments, and to sort of meet people where they are and provide services in the community while also maintaining kind of safe and healthy environments in those camps and helping to do trash removal and clothing and bedding exchange. Modifications to the annex site, so the primary site that Arcata House Partnership works out of, to provide better COVID safety for both staff and clients, and to do some significant upgrades that they need to be able to better provide food services. And then purchase of 2 needle disposal kiosks, and to fund regular disposal servicing for them. And we expect those funds to be available in late summer, and we'll be rolling out some of those, those programs as soon as we receive notification and approval from the state to do so. The council has in our goal setting, and this will come before you for final adoption in your budget, but your number 1 goal this year was to work on a 2 to 3 year homeless reduction strategy and a framework for identifying some initial priority benchmarks. And part of that was to support Arcata House Partnership in securing funding for hotel conversion to permanent supportive housing, utilizing Project Home Key, and that is in one of our long-term goals of the working group, to identify an ongoing funding stream, such as a sales tax or a parcel tax, increased TOT or vacation rental tax, cannabis tax. There's a lot of different ways it could be viewed. But something that we would consider as a ballot measure, ballot initiative for voters to consider in 2022 is ongoing funding to support services. Identifying a location and operational funding for a day center, and supporting the collaborative that we have existing, providing additional support through Arcata House Partnership. And then long-term, we had talked about developing more cooperative housing models here in Arcata. So the Homelessness Services Working Group has identified a few short-term potentials and then some midterm and some long-term. I can stop for just a minute to make sure there aren't any questions before I review the short, mid, and long-term.
I'll see any questions. Just raise your hand if so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So on the short-term side, we have really been looking at what would it take to do low barrier shelters, either just individual night shelters or more long-term low barrier shelters, similar to the experience that we were able to fund in the emergency shelters in the parking lot. The program would require identification of a site, installation of temporary shelter units, securing fencing, support facilities. Our major challenge on low barrier shelter right now is that there is some changes in the building code that actually go into effect on July 1st of this year that are requiring these types of shelters to meet additional health and safety and accessibility codes. So we are working through what that looks like and what that might potentially bring to bear in terms of the cost of setting up that type of low barrier shelter. We are also talking through sort of the logistics of a business district engagement program. So this would fund outreach workers to provide morning outreach to individuals that are currently sheltering in doorways and are in close proximity to our local business districts. This would be in Valley West, Northtown, Creamery District, Marsh District, and the Plaza. And it would assist with cleanup from nightly sleeping and connect individuals with services. We have identified a funding source for this, and at this point are working on the application to receive that funding and try to initiate that program. We also secured a grant this year to do natural resource property outreach specific to Carlson Park. So we're waiting for that grant agreement. We've submitted everything that we need to on our end, and we're just waiting for the green light. We have been in contact with New Directions, which is operated by John Shelter's group, to do that site cleanup and engagement and service provision for individuals in the Carlson Park area. John Shelter's group did help maintain that site when it was under Caltrans ownership and is very familiar with the site and the natural resources provisions on that are required from Caltrans on the site as well. Talked earlier about the tenant-based rental assistance. So we have secured $1 million in funds. Outreach to sign people up for that program will begin once those contracts are finalized, but we do anticipate that by the end of summer. And then you're all very familiar with the Mobile Intervention Services team. So really that was just initiated in March of 2021. So we're just starting to understand, what the potentials are for that program. And in another, 3 to 6 months, I think we'll have a much better sense of what type of long-term funding that program, how large we would want to ramp that up, what are the critical hours that it operates, the critical numbers that it operates in, and be able to provide a recommendation to the council. And then in a short-term possibility, we are seeing that some of the funding coming out kind of post, and this stage of COVID does also allow the hotel shelter to pay for hotel vouchers. And so I do think in the short-term potential, this group will start to look at some alternatives to potentially retain the hotel sheltering program that we have right now. In terms of midterm potentials, the county is actively working on releasing a request for information for operators to actually operate low barrier shelters. So one of the barriers that we have sort of run into on low barrier shelters is to find operational support and expertise. Arcata House Partnership, as we have talked about, is just an absolute tremendous partner. We are so fortunate to have them operated and headquartered here in Arcata. Their services are in large demand throughout the county, and at some point they're just absolutely working way beyond their capacity now, and we need to be able to find some additional support to operate programs that help support those experiencing homelessness right now. And so the county is looking at doing a request for information. The idea is that we could establish low barrier shelters that do meet the new building guidelines that would be standardized throughout Humboldt County and then operated, in coordination with each other and in coordination with Department of Health and Human Services. Second midterm potential is additional housing vouchers. So the local housing authority is gearing up to go after 182 new emergency housing vouchers. So that's a big number for our community. We're working right now with the local partnership, the Continuum of Care, Arcata House Partnership, to try to secure as many of those vouchers as we can receive and we think we can identify housing for. But we have had some really creative ways that we think we can utilize those vouchers. And those are permanent. That is permanent supportive housing money for those individuals here in our community. And then long-term, I touched on quickly already, is what's called Project Home Key. The governor's budget proposal includes $1.75 billion one-time funding for Project Home Key. This is expected to fund further hotel conversions. He did have a round one of this money, and to provide up to 5 years of support funding for these operations. So the working group right now is discussing the development of a project to be really fund ready once that source of monies is released and those notice of informations go out, we can put in an application. So, I think we all recognize that there is a growing need. There are a lot of new projects under development trying to help meet some of that need. I think that our tenant-based rental assistance program, in part, might help many individuals as we come out of COVID that would be facing evictions be able to stay housed. But we recognize that we're going to have to continue to communicate and to work with our community to try to find additional solutions as we can. So I will stop there and open up for your discussions, and we're all here to try to help answer questions and brainstorm.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we'll start with questions from the council, starting with Vice Mayor Watson.
I don't have any questions. I'll have some comments later. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, same. I don't have any questions. That was a great thorough overview. I have a couple comments when we get to commenting, but no questions.
Okay, and Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
The same. I have comments, but no questions.
Okay, and Councilmember Goldstein.
I have I guess it's a question. So I was just wondering, and I probably should know this because I am part of the working group. Has there or will there be some type of like needs assessment, or informally or more formally with houseless individuals to see what services they're actually going to utilize or want and need? Because I think that's one of the trickiest things when talking about some of these things. They sound really great, but if nobody's going to utilize them because they're not what they really want, then you have a service and nobody using it. So I was just wondering if there's a plan for that or if that's happened in the past.
There have been a couple of surveys. We obviously do the point in time count every year. We find that we think that that's probably grossly underestimates the number of individuals without shelter and that given night anyway in Arcata. Arcata House Partnership has done a lot of outreach, and they have done a lot of sort of survey work with their both their street outreach and then people coming in requesting services. But I don't know if I've seen, and David, jump in if you have, where we have formalized that in any kind of a report. So I think that would be a great discussion to have with the working group and bring back recommendations from that. I think Darlene might have some data that we could start to populate that with, and we could look at the gaps and see what other kind of survey work we would like to do. It's a great idea.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, I guess a question I have, maybe it's a bit of a leading question. Given that it is one of our priorities to look at a 2022, ballot measure for a funding mechanism to support homelessness services and affordable housing in Arcata, and we're in 2021 right now. It's going to sneak up on us. Basically, we would need it would be by next summer, that we would need to vote to put something on the ballot. So given that time frame, when could we get some recommendations of, I think from the working group, I think it would be really helpful to get an estimation of what would be a reasonable ongoing funding source, like amount. Is it in a bit evidence-based, looking at the operations and, looking at all these different funding opportunities that we're going to get. So, obviously those aren't long-term sustainable, and obviously we can't, with one ballot measure fund ending all of homelessness in Arcata alone. I think, we that would probably cost, it would cost a lot of money. I think I appreciate everything that's been talked about in terms of what's been done, but it costs a lot of money. It's very money intensive, I think, to do this work. So that's why I think we need a funding source, and what could we expect to be a reasonable timeline for the working group to come back to the council and give some recommendations of, you know, here's the different amounts of money. Like, this is what $250,000 would help us get. This is what $500,000 would help us get. And I think contextualizing that would be really helpful for this council to be able to then identify what are the revenue generators that would help meet those needs. So yeah, that was a long-winded leading question. Do we have an idea of how long that would take probably for the working group to give us that estimate?
I mean, I don't have an answer, but thank you for asking that. I think it's an important question.
I think we could report back. I think we've got 2 great topics for our next meeting so far. And I think they would very much like to do that work together.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks for entertaining my leading question. Let's see. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this item?
It does not look like we have any members of the public to comment on this particular item.
Okay, well, let's go back through, because it sounded like people were holding back comments. Vice Mayor Watson.
Yeah, you know, I think this is it's important for the public to know. We get a lot of, comments, I guess, and complaints really about homelessness all over the city. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that we're not doing anything. And I think it's important for the public to know that this problem, it's just, to be honest, it's not going away anytime soon. It's a huge problem that the entire state's struggling with. And, I can say from my conversations with Councilmember Goldstein, it's something that we're both really passionate about. And it is our, I think our top priority for the next year. And we are doing everything we can to work on this. We work on it every day. I know the staff works really hard on it. And yeah, those are my comments. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I really want to reiterate that too, because we do get a lot of emails, phone calls, whatever it might be about, the houseless individuals in our community and, what a lot of people see as, a detriment to the community. So let's come together as a community and figure out a way to transform this, which is another reason that I'm definitely very much in support of, creating a long-term funding source, whatever, a sales tax, other sort of property tax, whatever that might be, what we come to, because it's really something that the whole community needs to come together and realize, if we want to transform our community and improve it, this is something that, everybody needs to do, because you can't just, wave that magic wand and have $1 billion to build 2 new homeless shelters and a couple housing units and everything like that, right? It takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of work. And just to reiterate that idea that, yeah, we are always, all of us on council and city staff, and especially, Arcata House Partnership are working constantly. And, to see on this list that Arcata House Partnership is, ready to even take on another thing right now with how much that, they are really doing as, a pinnacle of our community to really help houseless individuals is just, shows, their dedication and our community's dedication to wanting to try to find solutions. So I just, I'm very in support of the low barrier night shelter. I think that's going to be really amazing for our community. And I think the work that, Arcata House has done, even with the parking lot shelters in the past and the work that they're doing now in Valley West with their new offices there, it's all amazing. And so just really, I think all of us were very passionate about this and, really coming together as a council to be behind something that could be transformative, a ballot measure that could provide us a source of funding that we could really make a difference in this community. And so I think that's going to be a really important piece, for us to work on. And, already now starting to think about that and getting something like that in front of us is going to be important. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
My comments are pretty much on the same line as the others that have been made, but I do just really appreciate the thorough report because, we only sit on so many committees and don't know what's happening on them unless we hear from them. And so even though I, have a pretty good idea of what's going on when I read my council packet, I learned a lot that we're doing that I was unaware of. And so I think it's really important for us to stay connected and for the community to also hear what's happening and what is being done, because there is a lot being done, even more than I realized. And not to put the that working group on the hot seat, but I feel like since this is one of our top priorities, it should be on our agenda more often, and just probably a bigger part of our discussions, because it is in the top of what we want to do. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, I fully echo everything that's been said. I think this is an area that we all care deeply about. And I don't think that's putting us on the hot seat at all. I think that's actually a really good idea. I love being part of this working group, and I think it's something that Vice Mayor Watson and I can talk about doing more often, a report out or something, to make sure that we're keeping you all updated too, since we are the only two that get to be on that group, at least this year. So I think that's actually a great idea. And yeah, I mean, we have some really exciting ideas. I am continuously blown away by Arcata House Partnership and just the amazing work they do, and how tirelessly they work. It's just pretty incredible to see that. And I think we are very, very lucky that they are based in Arcata. Yeah, I don't know. I have hope for this because of how much energy I know everybody is willing to put in. It's one of those topics that feels really big. And as Vice Mayor Watson said, it's not going away, unfortunately, anytime soon. But I do actually think we have a real chance to make strides forward here. We have some really great plans and a lot of energy behind it. So I'm hopeful for the future. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Yeah, very, very grateful for all the hard work everybody, city staff, everyone is doing on this.
Great, thank you. Just a couple things to note. One, just thinking about natural places to give updates on, working groups and committee work. At the end of our agenda, when we have council and staff reports, that's typically a time where if we don't formally have something on the agenda, but you do have an update of, for any of us that are we're liaisons or we serve on the different JPAs, just know that is always an appropriate time to give an update to the group. And then if there is something that needs more discussion from the council, then at that point we can say, hey, this is something this group is talking about. Should we put it on the agenda? And that's usually a time that we can, vet something like that and bring back to the council in a more formalized fashion. So just wanted to note that's always a good place to give updates without it being formally on the agenda, if that's not happening in advance. And then, yeah, I just wanted to add, just because I think it was a part of the large, there was a lot going on in those updates. And I think given my work on the Governor's Council on Homelessness and looking at things from that statewide lens, just really giving credit to our governor who has been really bold on this, because this is not an issue typically politicians want to touch because it's insurmountable. It feels insurmountable. So why would any politician want to touch that issue, right? Because you want easy wins in politics. And I appreciate the statewide leadership and the local leadership being willing to take this on and say, we can do better, even if it feels insurmountable. And specifically the 5 years of operation funding, that is huge. I think it was it was a part of a large report, but that is huge. And I know that was something that we, really deliberated on this state council, was what are the things that would really make a difference? And that was one of the things that we identified, was that longer term operational funding. It's just hard when it's 3 years. It's just you can barely get something off the ground, and then finding sustainable funding at that point. It's too difficult to have that quick of a turnaround. So I just really want to show appreciation. Not that he's watching this, he's got other things going on, but I think for the public to understand that there are changes happening at a state level that are also positioning us well to address this in a ways that we weren't able to before. And the Project Home Key is another great example. So just there's a lot of state resources coming down the pipe that are helping us. And I appreciate that we have a council and a community that wants to move forward on this and like leverage that opportunity and that we don't want to waste it. So just wanted to give that context and appreciation for everyone working on this. Let's see. I think with that, we can move on to item C, review and consider the new projects proposed for the capital improvement program fiscal year 2021-22. And can we have a staff report from City Engineer Khatri?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, staff, and members of the public. The item in front of you is to review and consider new projects for the CIP, I call it Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 21-22. Our first CIP or Capital Improvement Program was prepared in 2010, and that included the projects for 2010 to 2015. Since then, we have been updating 5-year CIP annually through a budget process. Each year, based on the city needs, council goals, and available budget, we prepare a list of projects to be added on that 5-year CIP. The list is refined during our goal setting with the council members. Then it goes to the Planning Commission to ensure the projects are consistent with our general plan. This year, we have added only 3 projects to be considered. Those 3 projects are in your staff report as an attachment A. Project number 1 is upgrading the radio system for the Arcata Police Department. Second one is 30th Street Improvement Project and bridge installation. Third project is purchasing 2 new electric bus for the transit division or for the transit. Attachment B includes prior projects or prior 5-year CIP, which was approved through budget process last year. With addition of these 3 projects, now we will have 56 projects which will be in progress. Most of the projects are in progress. Few of them are on hold because of the budget constraints. Few of them are completed, and they will be removed once we finalize the list at the end of this year. So far, I would say from 2015 till 2020, City has invested $25.5 million through CIP program. And in next 5 years, we are scheduled to invest $50+ million through our CIP program. So that's my quick snapshot of the CIP, and all these projects will be incorporated in our budget, and it will be coming in future meeting for your approval. So today we'll be taking some public comments, and if you have any questions, I'm here to answer the questions.
Thank you, City Engineer Khatri. I just wanted to clarify, since we do have 3 new council members, that the item before you tonight is just really to add those 3 to our list, to readopt our full project list. You're not allocating budget to any of those. That will all be done through the budget. Doesn't mean we're going to have money for everything on the list, but it means that we strive to keep it in our vision. That's all.
Thanks for the clarification. I think that's helpful. Also for the public to know too what we're voting on. Let's see. I'll ask for questions from the council, starting with Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Goldstein.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Schaefer.
No questions. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Yeah, I was just curious, where do the electric buses get charged?
As you know, we don't have enough room in our transit area or at the end of 9th and 10th Street. So they will be charged at HTA station where our bus gets maintenance. Our buses are stored there overnight anyway. So we will have a charging station there for our electric bus charging.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. I don't have any questions. So do we have any members of the public wanting to comment on this item?
Checking if we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this item. And it does not appear so.
Okay. I will entertain a motion from the council, or any final comments, of course.
I move that we approve the proposed projects for the capital improvement program fiscal year 2021 to 2022.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote by roll. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we have oral and written communications. This time is provided for people to address the council on matters not on tonight's agenda. Please raise your hand if you are on the Zoom webinar, or press *9 if you are on a phone line and you would like to make a public comment. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. When it is your time for public comment, the clerk will unmute you and invite you to speak. Do we have any folks open to comment?
We do not have any public comment.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will move on to council and staff reports. Are there any staff updates?
I just thought I'd answer the most common question that I'm getting this week, which is yes, the first 3 weeks of crabs tickets are on sale now. So HumboldtCrabs.org. And they're going to go fast, so get your tickets. You have to pre-order. They will not sell them at the gate. So, and you have to buy your whole pod. So, but it's going to be a really fun season. We're excited to see baseball played in Arcata.
Great. That's a wonderful update. I think the community appreciates hearing about, for sure. Let's see, Councilmember Atkins Salazar, any updates from you?
Yeah, I just have one. I'm the Main Street liaison, and since I'm new to this process, I'm not, exactly sure what is to be done or the process moving forward, but I just wanted to make the council aware that we're down to 2 board members on that. So they are going forward with the Oyster Festival, which is going to be happening. It's like a pre-order and express type of festival, and it's moving over to the Creamery District. But there are only 2 active board members to my knowledge right now. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that.
Thank you. And that's an impressive feat, just be pulling off an event under these conditions in general. So on top of that, wow. Thank you. Councilmember Goldstein.
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schaefer.
Nothing to report, and thank you to City Manager Deemer for answering my ever-burning crabs question that I've been asking like for the last month. So I've already got my tickets.
Okay, and Vice Mayor Watson.
No updates, thanks.
And yeah, I don't think I have any updates. Yeah, HWMA, Humboldt Waste Management Authority meeting is next week. So I guess after that, I'll have an update. Okay, on to dates of future meetings. We have our annual budget study session on June 15th, starting at 5:30, and a special meeting for a study session with the Planning Commission and to discuss and adopt the 2021-22 annual budget, Thursday, June 24th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m., both via teleconference. And then lastly, we just need to determine a summer schedule for city council meetings. Karen, can I just turn over to you to give kind of context of how we typically handle this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I mean, the council does in the summer often take, one or in some summers 2, meetings that they try to consolidate and take 1 or 2 meetings off in the summer. But then we've had some summers where we've tried to go straight through. So I have just heard from several of you about times that you might be away from the area, and wanted to put this on the agenda to see if we wanted to try to stick through the whole summer schedule, or if there was a particular time that you wanted to try to have a special meeting that you were all going to be here, or if there was a particular meeting that you wanted to cancel because we wouldn't have many people or a quorum here. So I don't know. We had a long-standing practice of the first meeting in August, but that really was around a past council schedule, and I haven't heard any of you talk about that week yet. So I can't really recommend that one. Oh, except maybe Sarah. Okay, Sarah's going to be gone the first week in August. So I thought we should just have a discussion, and we don't have to finalize it tonight either. But just if we wanted to start throwing dates out and talk about it, it would be good.
I mean, I guess first of all, is there even an interest from the council in entertaining, that practice of, consolidating stuff into one special meeting and canceling one of the regularly scheduled meetings? I think foundationally, just need to know if there's an interest in that from the council or any opposition to that, or indifferent. The reason why, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm indifferent. I am going to miss our next council meeting, but I'm unable to zoom in on that. But considering that we can have, I guess in theory people might like to take a vacation without having to attend work. I get that, but we also do have the option of zooming in, which wasn't available in the past, with Brown Act rules. So as long as that's still in place, I think I can make everything else work, but I'm indifferent.
Yeah, I'm pretty indifferent too, though. I have already, I will be gone the first week of August. And if we did take that off, then that would be, convenient for me. But, actually the summer is my less busy time most of the time as a teacher. So I'm, fine either way.
I would agree. I'm planning on being away July 7th. In theory, yes, I could zoom in. Will I want to? I don't know. I'll be in Southern California with family that week. So that's my only time I think I'll be away this summer.
It sounds like we can all just rotate and miss a meeting and then still be okay, because it sounds like Stacey's gonna miss in June, you're in July, I'm in August. So I think, it seems like it would work out.
Yeah, that totally sounds fine to me. Vice Mayor Watson, any thoughts?
No. Well, I guess maybe. I would just say, we can always, if we have an agenda where there's really nothing on it, you can always decide to cancel the meeting too, right? As the mayor.
Yeah, but we can always assess if it's looking light. And I guess the other consideration, Karen, too, is that if it's looking like staff are also, because that has been a routine, the first meeting in August. So if it does look like staff, like department heads or, whoever are kind of taking time off around the same time, if that's just something that would affect what's going on in agenda, we can also assess from there.
No, I appreciate that. And I think Vice Mayor Watson brought up a good point that in part we've also canceled because our agendas do tend to be a little bit lighter in the summer. But that being said, we also, after July 1st, we also tend to have a lot of bid work that's going out. So sometimes we've scheduled a special meeting to make sure we can keep bids moving efficiently and get construction work on the ground happening. So, but happy just to play it by ear. It does sound like you're all going to sort of split. And we can look at the agenda items to make sure that we've got a full quorum, for meetings that have all of our work is significant, but have things that really require all 5 of you to be there, like the budget, So, yeah, but I appreciate the discussion.
Okay, great. So we'll just play it by ear. So with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.